Welcome back to Brothers of the Arcana. My name is Alex Aldea.
I am David Ferrigno.
And I am Freddie Starr.
Excellent. Freddie is a buddy of ours, also a newly minted Freemason, which is how we know him. And we'd love for him to introduce himself a little bit and tell us a little bit about what he does and his background and all that good stuff.
Well, my name is Dr. Freddie Starr, and I am a medical doctor, and I have a specialty in psychiatry and child psychiatry. And then I also know a bit about what's called neuropsychiatry. So for the last 35 years, I have been looking at squiggles or EEG brainwaves and turning those into pictures of the brain. And so what I've learned how to do is help people figure out what's wrong with their brains to improve them both using traditional and alternative medicine.
That is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. And he was kind enough to give us these hats, which are pretty awesome too. And they have a Faraday cage on the inside of them, which is pretty cool, and just keeps your noggin safe from. I'm gonna put mine there. From harmful rays, I guess, like my Bluetooth headphones and other such things. That's an interesting thing. We can talk a little bit more about that. The cigar today is the.
Padron 1964.
Yes.
That's our cigar of the day.
So it's Padron 1964. And Freddie, you're a smoker, aren't you? To some extent?
I quit. I quit smoking.
Quitter.
Actually, quite a bit ago. Probably about 9 months ago.
So I want to talk a little bit about Mapacho as far as being a therapeutic tobacco rather than the commercial tobacco that we use in the West so much. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, if you would, some of the ayahuasca experiences and other such from the past. But first off, you made a statement to me, and I kind of agree with it. And I actually mentioned this on the last podcast with another friend, but you said therapy doesn't work.
I heard you say that. I heard a clip about that on your last podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm glad I'm getting to qualify it.
Fair enough. Okay, good. Because I've taken some therapy, and I think, again, it works if you work it, but then it's really you doing the work. It's not the therapy per se doing the work. The therapy is more of a modality that allows you. So please.
Well, what is therapy? First of all, it's a really big term. It's like saying food.
Right. I guess it's a relationship. In a sense, between you and the doctor, right? Which allows you to...
Doesn't have to be a doctor.
No, it definitely doesn't, right? So it can be anything, but within that context, then, okay, it could be a friend, it could be anything, but...
I don't think so. I think there has to be a monetary transaction and some therapeutic relationship. So I think you have to be in a therapeutic relationship with an individual who is somehow posing themselves as knowing more than you about your problem. And then you are supposed to exchange money with them or something that is of equal value that shouldn't be compromising you, such as, obviously a relationship. So a relationship that's physical is not necessarily going to be, there could be a therapeutic basis of it, but when we're talking about therapy, we're talking about this thing that originated in the early part of the 19th century with, I guess, Freud.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so psychoanalysis kind of dominated everything.
Freud, Adler, then Jung.
This is many decades later. Jung was a student of Freud. I would say, as far as, what I would subscribe to, it would be Jungian and not Freudian in my thinking in those terms. But where I come at it is people just throw this term around. You need therapy. Okay, I'm going to look in the yellow pages. Okay, I'm going to call this person. I don't understand the scientific basis of that. Now, in my practice as a psychiatrist, I said I also use traditional modalities. So someone might have post-traumatic stress disorder, and they may have completed a round of what I do, which is called EEG biofeedback. Okay. It's also called neurofeedback, but a lot of people call it brain training. And so let's say they still have some trauma, flashbacks, re-experiencing things that are more somatic in nature. Then there are modalities such as cognitive behavioral therapy that's been shown where you have a workbook You go home,
right.
CBT, and you figure out what the automatic negative thoughts are in your brain, and you work this program that has a beginning and an end. There's another one that's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, where you go through, again, a beginning and an end, where you have this thing that you're working on. I wouldn't say I would be against that, or would I necessarily argue that that's not helpful. Where I take issue is individuals in therapy indefinitely to where it becomes almost a power relationship. You know, there's a joke, you tell the therapist you're going, away, you want to move, and they panic and tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't bring yourself with you. You're going to bring yourself with you. It's all going to be the same, So
might as well stay here.
So that's where I say, just the term bandied about and telling people that they should go to therapy, and there's this all-powerful person that's going to solve the problems that may be neurologic, they may be biological. That's the part where I just don't see it. I see it failing.
I understand.
So there are many well-intentioned people who call themselves therapists who do offer help. But then the other thing is, you say, I've been with my therapist for 10 years and I couldn't have gotten through this, that, and the other thing. And my question is, how do you know you wouldn't have won the lottery and done a whole bunch of other things had you not done that?
So that's an interesting thing because, winning the lottery, for instance.
For example.
No, but so I'm Romanian by birth. And Romania experienced communism for a long time. And then after 89, eventually became capitalist, if you want to call it that. A lot of people got a lot of money very quickly, and then they committed suicide. After having no money and wanting money their entire life. Very interesting dynamic. So when you say, it could win the lottery, sometimes that's not a good thing.
No, it's not. It's often not. Actually, the studies on people who have won the lottery is actually quite poor. So maybe not a great example.
No. But I'm saying it leads to the point of you get what you ask for a lot of the time, and it's not really what was the best thing for you, whether it's therapy or whatever else.
Well, and then I think wealth is a lot, wealth is what people I think are striving for. And I think money has become equated to wealth. But wealth is really, I think, what, drives people, which is having, feeling security and safety in the things that they have and the things around them. And but I think it gets mistaken quite a bit.
That's interesting. So we started talking about this. Could you talk a little bit? I know you have some questions you want to pose, and you've been sitting there quietly, so go. Yes. Have at it.
I was going to say, you brought up the concept the other day of surfing the crazy. Would you be able to elaborate on that and just explain in your own terms?
Well, I'd like to. Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I got to tell a little bit about how I got here.
Yeah, tell us your background.
Yeah.
We'd love to. We would love to hear about it, and I think it'd be very interesting.
Well, once upon a time, I was very normal, and I expected a very normal life. So I was just minding my own business, being a traditional doctor, running a practice. But I had a child who was very ill. Her name was Anna, and she passed away when she was 6 years old in her bed. I found her, and that led to I didn't cope well with that. But I don't know that anybody does now that I've, done some grief work and everything like that and grief counseling. It's just unexpected. And so as a result, the marriage that I had at the time had, disintegrated, and I was left really just questioning life's purpose. Did you ever read Man's Quest for Meaning?
Viktor Frankl?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Logos therapy. Everyone has to have a purpose. Yeah. That works until the purpose dies.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's maybe if you have a higher purpose, then it is acceptable. But that will fall apart if you kind of put that on some material or living thing.
Well, Frankl started that
while
he was in Auschwitz.
Concentration camp.
Right. So I guess when you're under duress, you expect at some point you're no longer going to be under duress. And it's like, for this period, I have to figure out a way to cope, right?
Correct.
Like a monk setting himself on fire, for instance.
And so,
how do you navigate that without losing your mind while you're literally burning alive.
Correct.
So I guess to some extent, there's some commonality.
And
there.
so to some degree, if you're in, an abusive relationship and your finances are tough and you have a sick child and everything, there you're kind of going through fire.
Ooh,
so you kind of got to come up with a meaning.
What did Churchill say? If you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one.
It's, but please continue.
So I decided that I was going to go pursue my life's goal, which was surf big waves, go out to Maui and try to go to, it was windsurfing really was the main thing. Hokipa, those really iconic spots if you know the sport. So I did. And I was a mess. I was working as a psychiatrist and everybody I saw around me was having fun. I'm working every day and all my friends are just chilling at the beach.
This was in Hawaii.
This is when I moved because I had a job.
Right.
Yeah. So one day I just couldn't go to work anymore. My car kept going. Called the guy. Yeah, I'm not going to be at work today. Tomorrow?
Not like that.
Are you sick? No.
Not looking good.
No. I see was the answer.
Some office space.
So I went, I threw myself into that, just unexpectedness, the hero's journey, I guess Jung would call it, right? Or Campbell interpreting Jung would call it.
Sure.
And so, I moved in with a Hawaiian hippie band. And that was when I was reintroduced to magic mushrooms again. Okay. Came home after surfing and there was one of the lead singer making brownies. And she gave me a taste of the fudge and she's, can you taste the shroomies? And I'm like, did you just dose me? So, I took a lot of mushrooms that day and it was one of the things that helped me heal in the grief I was in.
Sure.
So, it helped with that. And then I was just sort of traveling around. I went from Hawaii. I went to the Dominican Republic for a while. It's another big windy spot for kiteboarding, surfing, ocean spot.
So windsurfing and kiteboarding are different things?
Yeah. Are you familiar?
Not so much. I did wakeboarding.
Okay.
But, that's about it.
Well, kite surfing you do with a kite.
Okay.
So you can fly up way high in the air.
Oh, it's where they do the flips and stuff and come back down? Yeah, I've seen that.
And windsurfing's the board with the sail on it.
Right.
And they're different.
As far as
Yeah.
Sure.
But obviously you're seeing the theme here.
Sure.
And so, it was through that journey I ended up in Costa Rica, sort of on the beach, that, I was able to kind of come up with this healing process and this ideas that I have. So, it's going back to what we were talking about with, man's quest for meaning and Viktor Frankl and, all of these different techniques and concepts. What I realized is that there's a lot of different people doing a lot of different things to help, mostly, some not. Some, yeah. I mean, there's gurus out there that maybe are doing it for their own.
You're talking about bad actors, in essence, like people who are out there for nefarious purposes rather than to actually help.
Yes, and even some are fooling themselves.
Like
I think some are fooling themselves into thinking that they're helping too. So I don't know that all of them are the sociopath, knowing that in the background they're taking all the money and controlling all. Some are like that. I think fewer.
Dr. David Hawkins, if you're familiar with any of his work, I'm not sure, but he did some interesting. He wrote a book called Power versus Force. Passed away in 2012. The guy, I've read a lot of his stuff. One of his big things is if you want to change the world, go home and work on yourself.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. But he actually had, as part of his book, a whole thing on gurus or quote unquote gurus who at one point were So he had just to back up for a second, he had a chart from 0 to 1,000 based on levels of consciousness. 1,000 being the great avatars, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and so on. 0 being basically dead, and I don't know, like 20 being Komodo dragons and possibly some dictators, which is about the same level. But he was saying how people attained enlightenment, were gurus and such, and then based on their followers, sleeping with their followers, other stuff like that, is actually they've lowered in consciousness because they got dragged down by greed or lust or whatever the case may be.
I call it root chakra.
Yeah.
I call them root chakra people.
Root chakra people. Fair enough. Yeah. Or even the second chakra people.
Right? Exactly. I mean, just it's appetitive. It's
right. So, but that's fascinating.
So I ended up coming to some peace, obviously, I mean, I did, and that was through meditation and psychedelics, the ocean, this technique I do because I had a brain injury when I was 18 on a motorcycle accident. And it was a whole modality of things that, led me to back here.
It's a crazy and fascinating story.
I wrote my way out of it.
You wrote your way out of it?
I did.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wrote 5, but I have 3 patents, U.S. patents in artificial intelligence and electroencephalogram, so EEG, and using a new method to break the waves down.
Wow.
And so that's what I did on the beach. I wrote myself, when I wasn't surfing, I wrote myself out of where I was.
That's amazing.
Because I wasn't really doing anything. I was working as a doctor in that when you're out in the wilderness and you need a doctor, you got to go somewhere.
Well, sure.
So, I was doing many things, but I wasn't formally doing psychiatry.
Do you attribute those thoughts and however you derived that procedure from the psychedelics, or do you think it was just more during your journey of healing?
No, it was during the psychedelics.
So I've done psychedelics. We talked about it a little bit on the podcast with Nestor. Could you talk a little bit? Celia Cruz called mushrooms little saints. Mm-hmm. And basically they show you the ways. Nestor says they give you homework, things to do when you're in there and basically come out. Mm-hmm. LSD doesn't work the same way.
I don't think so.
LSD is I think of it as more of like a gunk rotor-rooter. It's kind of like it takes a lot of the detritus that's hanging around and flushes it. But it doesn't do much else outside of that to some extent. And I don't know if it's because it's man-made rather than it being more holistic, so it has all the other stuff that's not just the active ingredient, but all the other things sort of go with it. Ayahuasca is, again, another going to grandma's house, as they called it.
DMT?
Well, DMT is just the active ingredient, right? But that has its own flavor.
I didn't so much enjoy that.
Which, ayahuasca or
DMT?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's too short, and it's funny. From the other side, the little machine elves or whoever it is that you're talking to on that side said, pay attention. We have things to say to you, and we know you're not going to be here for long because you're only there for about 10 minutes. Uh-huh. It's a full trip, but
5
or 5 minutes, whatever it is. Within 5. Right. So the full ayahuasca trip, much better overall, I think. Please, could you give us your
I have a crazy concept about mushrooms, or at least what they told me.
Yeah. What the mushroom said.
Yeah.
The mushrooms are talking to him.
They're funny. They are funny. Well, no, they weren't the mushrooms there. They were wherever I was.
Sure.
So you know how antibiotics come from bacteria and fight bad bacteria?
Yes.
Well, they told me that they have antifungals and that we're full of fungus.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing, is killing the toxins. They're killing the fungus that's the bad fungus.
Like the candida and like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
It's like an antifungal.
An antifungal. Huh. Interesting. So what What else did they say?
They're really funny.
Okay.
That's what they...
So they heal trauma with humor.
I think so, yeah.
Funny how?
Funny how, exactly. Hey, you, move that mic this way.
Whatever.
There you go. Okay.
I recorded about 100 people on mushrooms at a festival.
Okay.
So I did we went to a festival, my company, Minerva, had a booth.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah.
Had a booth in a festival in Costa Rica. It's a week-long environmentally conscious, soul-searching music festival with just a lot of really cool, eclectic people that go. And we took a booth there and recorded people at the beginning of the festival, and then after they had or during their trip, whatever, and we recorded what they had taken, and then after. And also looked at their level of insight, how they felt, their happiness, and things like that. And we saw that there was, some improvement in people's outlook and their sense of their locus of self-control. That's one of the things we saw change the most. And we saw that there's a part of the brain called the default mode network, which is your internally focused network. It's the network that allows you to go into your brain and be relaxed. We saw that go more towards what, you would expect to be normal across the group.
But did it last? Yeah,
I don't think so. Just in my experience of taking people to retreats and then sending them. I mean, that's how we started. I mean, that's how my company Minerva started, was sending these brain training machines that I have after they would. So I refused to come back to Babylon. You know what Babylon is, right?
No, what is it?
It's where we are.
Oh, you're talking about the Rastafarian.
Not exactly. I'm talking. Well, it's colloquial now.
Okay.
I would say, but people refer to Babylon as the going into society, civilization, your phone, your all of that stuff. And when you're out on the beach and there's nothing, and you're living on the land or something, that would not be Babylon.
Interesting.
So then, are you positing that if that's temporary, how could somebody then overcome, say, addictions? Like if a person's addicted to pornography, they're addicted to devices, they're whatever else. Is there a modality that works for everybody that would actually heal that? Or, is it always going to be temporary and it's a work in progress?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I would say that's where I come in. This is where I come into the picture, which is by getting a brain scan, analyzing the brain, knowing the strengths and weaknesses. If there is traumatic brain injury, I mean, I see people in their older age, 70s, 80s, who say played football, played soccer, have had mild subclinical mental health problems for years and years and years and years. Maybe on a med, maybe changed meds, sleep problems, depression, stress, anxiety, and addiction is one of the things that pops up along with this to cope with that. And then they even go on a protocol, even in their older age, that can put their symptoms towards remission. I mean, not allowed to say cure.
Sure.
But become unmeasurable,
right,
by my standards. And so I think that knowing what the root cause of the addiction is first of all how you address the addiction. So, and I think that there are I think mental health we're not going to cure this. We're not going to solve this problem. And I think the reason is because of the acceptance of what's causing it. I think there are four things. Okay. I think there are four things.
Four things.
And one is traumatic brain injury. And I think it's probably maybe in 20 to 30% of people that are presenting for psych. And it's not being checked.
Whether it's congenital or
no, you dropped on your head. No, dropped on your head.
Right. Okay.
You hit your head, you hit your brain, you had a concussion, and the brain is still showing the after effects of that.
Got it. Interesting.
Okay. And so it's not working right.
Right.
And I know for a fact that and
that's football injuries. That's any kind of sport.
You had the soccer ball one time. It's traveling 70 miles an hour. Or the physicist didn't say, "Oh, the skull's this thick." No, you kick the ball, you hit it with your head.
Sure.
So yeah, football, you have 1,000, just small hits during a season, not big ones. From beginning to end. Skiing. I mean, especially people in our age group. Helmets were a joke. You made fun. I mean, helmets. I ski raced. We didn't wear helmets.
I used to mountain bike, no helmet.
No,
yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So, we used to jump off big ramps with BMX bikes.
I think years ago we did everything without a helmet. Yeah. I'm shocked we survived childhood, honestly, sometimes.
Well, and I guess many didn't, and that's why we have given up our sense of adventure for a sense of security. But that's neither here nor there.
That's actually a big statement to make, but yeah, I agree with you. 100%.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
But the four things, I think, to the most part, a traumatic brain injury. Then the next one is post-traumatic stress disorder. That actually that causes physiologic changes in the brain. Mm-hmm. So there are parts of the brain that shrink and are parts of the brain that get bigger from trauma. I mean, I lived it. I went through it. I know what it's like. I mean, I've gone from there and back. And the third, which won't be addressed either, is environmental. So toxins in foods, medicines, the environment, high dose, high Gauss, EMF. There are so many different things that who knows what you're susceptible to versus I'm susceptible to versus what you're susceptible to, right? And some of those things can even drive addiction.
Yes.
Okay. So, and then the fourth is spiritual.
Mm.
The fourth is spiritual. It is a lack of connection to that which is, I think, distinctly human.
Hmm. Is there a feedback loop that can happen with addiction where you experience addiction because of lack of spirituality, let's say, but then the addiction further blocks the spirituality based on its own,
and then you think you're spiritual?
Well, it just takes the place of it, and ergo, or thereby, I should say, moves you further away from where you even were when you started the addiction, so to speak. So,
I think that those are the probably major sources of mental illness. And right now, as far as the book that I subscribe to, it's called the DSM-5. Many people refer to it as the Bible, which is a really weird thing to say. But
no, but I think they actually look at it
say
as
that.
the Bible.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really weird thing to say.
Psychiatry or psychology is the new religion, right? In certain respects.
It's unfortunately, I think, not going the right way.
There's a lot of dogma being created.
I don't think it's going the right way. I don't think anything really new is coming out. I don't think that they're embracing computational analytics, fMRI, PET scans. I think that they're just so entrenched in there. Many are not. I know great ones. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to generalize.
No, absolutely.
But as a group field, as that, I think it moves too slowly, and we're not near accepting environmental toxins as being a major cause of mental health problems. I mean, for example, vitamin B12. Mm-hmm. It's something that should be checked in individuals that have, say, depression, anything. I mean, even tinnitus, ringing in the ears. It's obvious to anybody that studies nutrition, B complex vitamins, yes. But to the average person, no. And so,
interesting.
And then, as I had said, the last one being, spiritual, that is not really accepted within the bounds of that paradigm, mm-hmm. right? So I don't know that we'll fully ever address the problems that plague humans emotionally and mentally until that's understood as well.
Well, it used to be a person would go to their priest, mm-hmm. and their priest would offer them what's equated to psychology at that time or therapy of whatever kind. And that would have the spiritual component in it. But if you go to your therapist, a lot of them, I mean, I don't want to make any particular political discussions at this point about who's where, but a lot of them may be atheists.
I think that's a reasonable statement to make.
Or many of them might be.
No, I think that's a reasonable statement to make.
Okay, fair. Mm-hmm. And so with that in mind, that just won't be available for that. So, they're going to substitute it with whatever they think is the right, quote unquote, spirituality, which is now equating to a lot of dogma. I see. There was one psychologist that talked about, and again, you're a psychiatrist, so I know it's different, mm-hmm. but there's a psychologist that talked about there used to only be a couple of neuroses and psychoses. Now there are hundreds. And it's growing more and more, especially as we get into the whole idea of the quote-unquote woke movement. And I won't make any judgments on it, but we'll just say that's a thing that occurs in the world. And with the things that as you go further, all the use of the pronouns and the use of all of the other things that's happening today all goes back to adding more dogma to the pile, so to speak. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I'd be curious as to your thoughts on that.
Agree with which part?
Any of it.
It sounded like a minefield.
Yeah, well, we'll skirt our way towards, the best we can, talking about, your thoughts on it. But, whatever.
You're talking about the destruction of our language?
Well, there's some of that is could be said that way, I think.
How does a society function?
I don't know. How does a society function?
How does it function with that? No, with that happening.
I don't know. I mean, you've got, on some level you have the Frankfurt School of mm-hmm. folks coming over after World War II. Because of World War II, really, a lot of immigrants came over, German immigrants. Some were philosophers from the Frankfurt School that developed into critical theories of all different kinds. There's a bunch, critical mm-hmm. race theory being one of those. Mm-hmm. But there's critical political theory, critical economic theory, critical philosophy, and so on. And so that I think started with a good idea, almost a Socratic method. Let's question everything. Mm-hmm. That's a good idea on its face, right? But then we've come to certain conclusions lately on those things, and I'm not sure if those conclusions are the best for society.
Doesn't, from my vantage point, it doesn't seem to be.
Mm-hmm. So, that's not really our show, talking about modern political stuff. So, we're more discussing broader esoteric ideas. So we were talking about, you were bringing up addiction. Have you ever heard of I know the answer is no already, but it's called the Peniston-Kolkowski study. No.
Peniston, P-E-N-N, I think it's P-E-N-N-I-S-T-O-N Kolkowski, K-U-L-S-K-Y.
We'll try to put a link down at the bottom for folks about this. Mm-hmm.
I think this was done in the early 2000s.
Okay.
They took 20 veterans mm-hmm. who had severe alcohol use disorder and split them into two groups. One group received this specific kind of brain training, neurofeedback training, as well as they learned how to warm their hands, which if you want to ask me more about that, I'll tell you.
Oh, I'd love to hear
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other group received, both groups received traditional methods, mm-hmm. therapy, if they needed inpatient groups. And so the group that received the neurofeedback therapy, after 2 years of following that group, one dropped out. One, they lost to follow-up, but 9 had never had a readmission, were abstaining from alcohol, and all employed.
Wow.
10 out of 10 in the non-neurofeedback group had readmission.
That's compelling.
And just in my own clinical practice, I've tried to repeat certain things that I haven't seen repeat, but this one I've repeated many times in clinical practice and see it work. Mm-hmm. People, hardcore drinkers, stop, almost unable to drink anymore.
Wow. It's pretty amazing.
Unable because the drink was a coping mechanism. And it just doesn't.
Changes something in their body.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The body finally has the agency to say, this isn't for me.
I believe it had something to do with alpha waves and beta endorphin, I think it was. And they also have used it in opioid addiction with success.
So from your brain scans that you're conducting, do you see a huge difference in individuals? I know porn addiction is a huge thing nowadays. There's also obviously the black mirrors or, our phones and devices people are clearly addicted to in modern day society. Do you actually see that physical scan? When you're actually conducting your EEGs or whatever else, can you actually see that trauma? And if somebody starts changing their behavioral habits, there's a visible actual, I guess, however you see it on your screen, you see that change.
Yes, 100%.
And what kind of time frame does it typically take for that change?
With doing the brain training?
Yes.
20 sessions, 20 to 30 sessions, depending on the age, ability to learn, what's going and what's wrong. But 20 to 30.
Okay.
Interesting.
We never got back to surfing the crazy.
No.
So that's what the story I was telling.
Yeah.
So when, I realized that I once had it's patience really that taught me a lot. It's actually my patience. And one thing you said, I remember one, but, one was, so I was going through a hard time. I was still helping people that were going through a hard time. So it's much easier to help people when you're going through a really hard time, actually. I think I did some of my best work. But someone said, I got to just put one foot in front of the other. And, I realized that for, in some times when everything is closing in and, maybe your mental health is not that great either. And maybe finances aren't that great. And, all of the pressures and stresses that come with modern life and not being able to cope with it. You really have to pay attention to the foot that you're on. Okay. And so if that foot that you're on, you kind of are feeling crazy, then you have to be okay with that in that present moment, knowing that wave, like we were talking about somebody that was, I think perhaps had bipolar or something like that.
Right.
And so the, idea that when they're feeling that way, that it's a wave and that they can surf that urge or that feeling, and because it will pass, it crescendos and breaks, and then it's gone. And that's the same thing with addiction. So, see, I think also with addiction, you have to, there's will, whatever that is, your own, there is, so whatever you use to do that, whether it's spirituality, meditation, at some point the urge is going to build. And if the person has to make that decision, and that's when extinction happens in behavior, is when it goes to the highest point. It's called the extinction burst. The extinction burst is when the example I remember from the books are when, the parent takes the kid into the toy store and the kid throws a temper tantrum. And so they leave and they have to keep leaving and leaving for the kid to, because that's what they said they were going to do. And they just right before, they come back and say, it's not working. This is terrible. Every time we go, he's getting worse and worse and worse. The last time was the worst. Eventually it extincts. And it usually the behavior becomes the most right before it goes. Or the desire to do the behavior. Yeah. So there's a piece of that too. There's a decision component. Even in addiction, even if you want to take the basis of it as a disease, even if you want to fully accept that addiction is a disease, at the end of the day, there still has to be, you might need extra help with that urge. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the person deciding.
In your training, would you say addiction is a disease?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't suffer from it. I don't. But I've spoken to many people that do, and I know that they feel very strongly about that. And so you'd have to come up with what you would call a disease. What would be the definition of disease first for me to really answer that fully? Certainly there is a behavioral component to it, because if a person has alcohol dependence and you safely, you put them in a hospital. Obviously, alcohol is can be dangerous in withdrawal. So obviously, but if the alcohol's out of their system, it's not that they need alcohol to live. They will continue to live if they don't drink. So is it a disease? It's a question I don't pretend to have an answer to.
Yeah. It's a tough one. It could be, it's a disease of the mind, but again,
Exactly
I think if you die from it, it was a disease.
I mean, if you get to the point where it's a cirrhosis or something, certainly it's a physical part of it.
So I would think, obviously, you hear stories about people quitting smoking. Some can just go cold turkey, and others, it just seems like they're always craving that cigarette no matter what.
I am always craving that cigarette.
Got it.
Did you ever get to the extinction event with tobacco?
When you forget about it and you stop thinking about it, yeah. And then you think you're okay, and years and years and years go by, and you go, okay. And then a couple weeks go by, and you go, okay. And then it's a week, and then it's and then yeah.
Yeah. I haven't really talked about my addiction.
I mean, I miss it. I mean, I can't say I don't miss it.
But
I mean, I'd like to have a healthy relationship with tobacco, but I almost wonder if it's a bioweapon.
Speak more about that.
Whoa, we kill ourselves with it.
Well, we kill ourselves with everything.
That's true.
I mean,
like what?
Well,
if I were to eat lettuce all day, every day, versus smoking tobacco.
I'm sure.
Well, right. But I think with the GMOs, and we're not going to get into political discussions here, but clearly I think we could say a lot of the food here is making individuals unhealthy. And I think if you go to Europe or other places that have banned a lot of that, I think
you're probably better off.
You're much better off.
I don't think my general health here is better than it was living in Costa Rica and getting things from the land and locally. No.
Okay.
Right.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Why did you think about coming back and not just staying in Costa Rica, for instance?
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
I came back with a purpose.
Okay.
Promote health, generate wealth.
You couldn't generate wealth in Costa Rica?
For others.
Interesting. Oh, you're here to generate wealth for others.
And just wealth in general, not money.
Can you talk more about what that means to you?
Knowledge.
Okay.
Being around friends and family, and I had to go off into the wilderness.
Right.
But they say, you have to come back and tell your journey, or it's not a hero's journey, it's a fool's journey.
See, that's an interesting thing. Joseph Campbell tells you, right? So you come back.
You have to come back.
You have two options. He doesn't make a judgment on them. You can either be the Buddha and spread what you have, or the hermit and keep it for yourself. But he doesn't make a judgment on which is better than what.
Right.
So you could have kept it to yourself and all's fair, right? So you took the journey, you deserve whatever it is, but you've chosen to now come back and share that journey with others.
Well, it's possible that had I known what I know now, that my daughter's epilepsy would have been much better controlled.
That's a strong statement to make, and I'm sure that, but it wasn't to be the case, unfortunately.
It was not.
Can you talk a little bit?
And that's right.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I chose this dimension.
Okay, now we're getting into some really esoteric, cool stuff. So, how do you view the universe and our place in it?
There are two infinite things. No, I'm quoting Einstein. The universe, you never heard that quote by Einstein. There are two things that are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. I'm not sure about the latter.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, I was making a joke about that.
Got it.
How do I?
No, I don't know that one.
What do you, I don't know. It very well could be a simulation.
A matrix kind of thing.
There's certainly, I think, some people that claim to be very, very smart say that.
That's interesting. Okay.
I think, was it Bostrom, I think, was the first statistician who came up with this idea that the likelihood of this being the prime-based reality is quite low. That most likely that in the prime-based reality, simulations have been built that are so advanced that those simulations would be building simulations within simulations.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an AI argument right there.
I guess.
Sure.
I mean, beyond AI artificial.
So
this is beyond.
it?
It's beyond that.
What's creating the simulations that are creating simulations? Right.
I don't have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy the journey and observing the world around me in a way that's trying. I'm trying to be scientific and non-judgmental about it.
Sure.
Trying.
Yeah.
Obviously humanness gets in the way.
Oof.
So if we're living in that simulation, do you feel our mind, because there's the thought that we manifest our own realities and manifest what we have in our lives. So do you think we have any control over that then?
Well, if I think I wrote myself out of my predicament, then I think that is true.
Okay.
I do. I think that we have power over our. Yeah, I think we do. I've written about this before. I called it quantum choice theory. You're constantly causing these choices that create branch points. Constantly causing these. Some are bigger, some are more eventful than whether or not you get a cup of coffee or get a cup of tea, right? But deciding not to go into the parking lot at the office and going straight to the beach would be one of those branch points where you completely change the trajectory that your life is on. And by virtue of changing the trajectory that your life is on, you're meeting new people, experiencing new things, and your reality is opening to things that it would not have experienced before. And again, these people that are supposedly exceptionally smart and say a lot of cool stuff say that reality that you didn't go to is still happening.
In a parallel dimension.
Whatever that means.
Sure. What is decision? I talk about this in a lecture that I do, but decision is the death of choice, right? So once you decide, you've now made a choice, and you now have killed off a choice and picked one, right? Now you don't have, it's not all potential anymore, and now it becomes reality. So metaphysics will tell us that everything here is made out of thought stuff, and this thought stuff, if focused on, can translate the idea from the idea plane to the material plane.
Sure.
Assuming you buy that particular construction.
Like Akashic field stuff?
Sure. Right? So it comes from the Akashic records or the Akashic plane to the material plane.
Sure.
And there's no such thing as cause and effect per se. Everything's a field of potentiality. Lynn McTaggart talks about it in The Field to some extent. How do you think that works? What's the actual mechanism?
How do I think that works?
Yes.
I think that people already thought of this, and so I will refer to them. The Fusukoi, who are known as the pre-Socratic philosophers. So this would comprise Thales of Miletus, who is considered to be the first of the pre-Socratics, Anaximendes, Philolaus, who is like one of the most brilliant things, like people I think I've encountered in my travelings and readings. Philolaus, who then these guys were then gave into the Pythagorean. This all then went into the Pythagorean school. And then, some people think that when Socrates drank the hemlock, that was sort of the end of that whole enlightenment. That's why they're called the pre-Socratics, because they were really free to think and about the universe and everything. And they were fascinated with one of two things that fascinated them greatly were fire and water, because of how unexpected they were. And they had names for things like the Aperion and like gnosis,
right?
And they kind of felt just the description in that I have read about really takes that, what you were talking about, kind of to the next level, in that we're these projectors, and that we are looking at this stream, and there are all these things out there that then we can bring into the stream, and then more people that are looking at the stream, the more that becomes reality.
So this actually gets into the double slit experiment on some level. That same idea, you fire enough photons at the thing and it starts to create a pattern. Are we all, by our focusing in a certain way, creating this pattern? But then what is our ability? So now you're not talking about a creation, you're talking about a co-creation. And we're all co-creating simultaneously, let's say, assuming we're not all figments of each other's imaginations. So when we're co-creating in that way, what is our agency towards the entirety of the whole? Like, how much of that can we actually affect? Or do we start to bump up against what other people are creating?
I think so.
So then how can we get what we want? Or how do you surf that if you can't get what you want? How do you get to where you want to go?
Wouldn't that be a good reason to control information and make things so everyone sees them and believes them? And like, wouldn't it be cool if you could tell everybody's vision of what you saw, and so they would all look at it? Maybe we should call it something. Maybe we should call it television. And maybe we should call the things we watch on it programming.
Okay, got it. I get what you mean.
I see that tangent.
My anxiety level is rising.
We are doing that.
And I always say that. I always tell everybody that's why they call it programming.
That's why they call it programming.
Yeah. But getting back to, look, I am a libertarian at heart.
Yeah.
So my question always comes back to what can we do as individuals to live the best lives that we can? How do we get there? How do we get from point A to point B? Irrespective of what may or may not be happening in the world around us. Because from a Buddhist perspective, it's all Maya anyway, right? So whatever they choose to do or not do, the they that we're talking about, what do we do to just simply ignore that and move on with what we're doing?
Tune in your Om channel.
Okay.
Tune in your Om channel. Okay.
Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah. If everything we're saying is true, then you have a perfect right frequency with which you're supposed to reverberate and vibrate at. But again, we'll go back to the first thing what I was saying is my postulate, which is that there's 4 things that are causing mental suffering. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing would be to figure out how to address those. But the problem is that in some people, the computer's not working. The CPU, it's got a bump, or it's been shaped by trauma. Mm-hmm. So the person that's, you and I are sitting in this, all of us, the 3 of us are sitting in this room, and our heart rate is at a certain rate, and we're not perspiring, we're not nervous, and we don't feel like there's a threat coming. But if somebody had a different experience in a room that looked like this, then they would be triggered. Their reality would be completely different. So it would be detoxifying, dealing with the trauma, and some of it is epigenetic, some of it is intergenerational, dealing with traumatic brain injuries if they are present, and you don't know if you had one or not. You have to just get checked for it. And there are more than just brain scans now to check. You can look at people's eyes and see there's a machine that can look in their eyes and tell. There's PET scans and fMRIs. And so there are other things now that we can use just besides the tool I use, which is called the QEEG. And then I think at least then once you have that channel, figuring out how it, goes in different directions. In other words, the surfing the crazy part. Mm-hmm. So, it's very easy. It's not that easy, but if you go to a retreat, a meditation retreat like Vipassana, have you heard of Vipassana?
Yeah, where it's about 10 or 11 days where you can't talk. You just have
That's one part of it. Yeah. I mean, that was never the worst part for me. Mm-hmm. The worst part for me was not eating, actually, was the lack of food.
Was it fasting, in other words?
It's after when you're considered an older student, they very much encourage you to have 2 small meals a day and drink tea at night. And that was the worst suffering for me. The not talking I didn't mind as much. But learning how to sit with yourself and, without anything, without anybody, knowing that. And then I think it makes it at least easier to operate in a world that there's so many different vibrations and frequencies pulling you in, obvious. But until you know your own, how can you be able to deal with the ones that are in the world?
Yeah. That's a tough one.
And I'm not pretending to have all the answers.
No.
Yeah. You're just putting questions to me that I'm trying to give my best answer to.
Sure, man. Yeah. I get it. From certain respects, and, I wouldn't expect Dave to discuss any particular personal stuff as such, but, I've discussed certain personal things of my own. Born in Romania, came here when I was 7. Didn't see my parents from about the age of 4 to about the age of 7 because they were here and the communists kept us back there. So grew up with my grandparents and other such. And, that 3-year period of development, I caused some things for me. Mm-hmm. And coming here and experiencing an immediate trauma of extraordinary stress. The parents I met at 7 were not the parents I left at 4. Or that left at 4. They were basket cases, and it were extremely difficult to make a life as an immigrant here. And how that affects a child, and the fact that they didn't really understand that. And I'm not judging them. Everybody did their best. I can clearly say that. Although stuff gets left and lingered, and how that affects an adult growing up and so on, and certain addictions that come of that. And so, I'd love to do a brain scan with you and see kind of where my brain's at. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Dave was thinking about the same kind of thing for Absolutely. His brain. Whatever.
I mean, especially playing football, soccer, baseball growing up. I mean, stupidly, a couple of years back, I was loading an ATV into my pickup bed and, of course, didn't wear a helmet, and the one ramp, the clip fell off, and I actually fell off the ATV in the bed and slammed my head against the concrete. I didn't have a concussion or anything, but my whole backside and side was bruised for probably a good month. I mean, it was like,
how do you know you didn't have a concussion?
Well, I don't technically, but I didn't feel like there was any cognizant, nobody said I was acting any differently or anything else. So that's why I kind of felt like maybe I was okay, but I don't really know. I'm not a doctor. I can't comment. Maybe I did have one. Mm. But
the gerbil's been off the wheel ever since.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the hamster falls asleep at the wheel. So
I don't know. I would have worn a helmet for that either, though. To put it on
who would have?
Right.
So I don't know that I would have.
In hindsight, it's like, well, I should have. But, and again, growing up, I mean, we did all kinds of stupid things. Like I said, I'm actually shocked that all of us survived childhood because we used to do, it was the 80s and the early 90s. It's like we did anything and everything.
What year were you born?
81.
Yeah.
So
76.
70.
Yeah.
I was born in 70.
But even so, we're talking about physical things, but what about generally accepted, less now, but when we were growing up, like bullying and other things like that that can cause lasting harm in people. I was a victim of bullying growing up. Being a smaller kid and an immigrant and everything else, it's not as easy to fit in as might otherwise be the case. We all got here. We're still here. So, but the things that linger with you are considerable sometimes. depending on what it is.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's tough because it's other people's kids.
Right.
I mean, but I don't know that we don't all have that universal experience of having been bullied. I mean, I had an older sister who was, I think one of the things, actually, you know what the most common form of domestic abuse is?
No.
Sibling violence, inter-sibling violence.
That makes sense.
It's so not addressed. You really can't find a lot of books about it. You can't find people talking about it. But I can tell you, when you start to scratch that surface with people, man, but I think it's like we try to forget it or stuff it down because we want to keep the family and all this, there's a whole psychological group of layers that goes along with that. But really in my, studies, when people have, I think that having older brothers actually gives a higher chance of having a head injury in a younger child.
Absolutely.
I'm sure. But
then sisters.
Is the understanding, although my sister is a force of nature, she's a very strong personality. And she's a younger sister, which is interesting because we I'm a Libra, she's an Aries, blah, blah, blah. But see,
there's one of the layers.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's one of the layers.
Right there. But so what you're saying is the fact that, the fear might be, if I deal with this and I open this box, I might lose my sibling,
family.
Lose my family. But what about transcending this and seeing your family in a new light without necessarily having to lose them? Even if you're transcending it just for yourself.
Yeah, you can do that.
So I now have a new relationship with my family. Whatever relationship they have with me, I don't know. But I'm now having a relationship with them that's different because I've transcended this thing.
Yeah.
Sounds more hopeful.
It does.
Some level.
It does. It takes two. But it takes them to allow you to be because there's often a lot of power dynamic in keeping one of the people kind of as the scapegoat. And if there is dysfunction, then that person not being the scapegoat anymore causes the dysfunction to get reflected back upon the dysfunctional family, and they don't usually go for that. So it typically leads to ostracizing.
But let me ask you this. You've now changed the equation somewhat, right? So that might be the answer. The new equal sign is now the dysfunction gets reflected back. But it would certainly have to cause them to change their behavior.
Well, they could disown you.
Oh, yeah, that could be one possibility. Yeah. And you got to be okay with that, right?
You got to be okay with that.
You got to be okay with that.
Right.
So then from that family trauma perspective, I think obviously maybe necessarily today people don't discipline their children like they used to, or the positive reinforcement. When I say discipline, I mean, I can speak from personal experience having an Italian mother. I mean, I got beat by the wooden spoon,
for what? Like,
well,
I'm always interested in this because I got beat pretty good a bunch of times. So and so I'm always trying to see like what the experience was. Was it like explosiveness just like for no reason?
Well, I think a lot of times it was just due to bad behavior. Like if there was something the parent didn't like that made them angry or whatever else, they would use that as a mechanism.
Like spilling milk.
I don't know about spilling milk. It was more probably, spilling milk all over the floor in the living room or something.
But I mean, you're sitting at the table, you move your hand, the milk spills, you get,
I don't think I ever had that per se, but I'm sure in some cases that happens. In my personal case, I think it was more like you wrote on the wall with crayons or things of that nature. And, with my mom, it was the wooden spoon. And with my father, it was always the belt. And, they just...
So on your behind.
God. Yes.
On your behind.
Yes.
Okay, so being punched in the face or choked or stuff like that, you think is beyond. Yeah. So where does the person draw that line, right? So if it's punitive... I guess, I don't know. Having been someone that did experience, has experienced that level of physical abuse, I think I'd say that it will wreck the relationship between the child and the parent when they get older.
Okay.
With regards to, hitting, if it can be I don't subscribe to it with my own children. Never, I don't, but I certainly have seen some boys that I'm not sure I would, I might, not blame the parents for their frustration, but, then there has to be restraint of violence.
So would you say there's a way that a parent could possibly reinforce something, or a teaching moment per se, that
with violence?
Well, not with violence. I'm saying, is there a better mechanism in your professional opinion? What would be the best way for a parent to teach their children and to not resort to violence, as an example, but make a lasting impression?
You have pets? Dogs?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do they listen?
Sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I just noticed I'm a dog person. I've always had a dog. I have 3 now. If you speak to them softly and show them what you want them to do, they're generally pretty good. But people that yell at their dogs, and the dogs don't listen when they yell. I mean, I see people with their dogs, and they're like, tiger, come. No, you never talk. You got to say it once, get up, get the dog, teach it what you want it to do. And so I think it starts very young, I think, with the parent being, I think, a person that's tuned in their own channel and that can serve their crazy. So it's on one can wait. If we're going to be libertarian here, we need to say, and I would say I would agree with that. I would be along the lines of that to some degree. I mean, there's some law enforcement stuff I don't quite understand how it works, but also I've experienced local anarchy, and it was actually quite wonderful. In the village, where I was, there's no real law. I mean, I don't want to, there are police.
This is people who are policing themselves, in essence. Sure. Yeah. So enlightened anarchy in the Marxist communist sense.
I mean, there's
the Hegelian sense. Yes.
I mean, there was a guy who was known to be have sticky fingers around. He nothing to do. This was a local person in an area. I'm not going to mention it, but he had a very strange death.
Yes, he was last seen with shoes in his ears, or whatever it was.
He suicided
He was
himself.
Electrocuted.
Oh, jeez.
And I don't want to laugh about something like that.
No,
but
don't.
It was.
Not.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, there certainly was the sense that was what happened. I mean, people didn't like him stealing from them.
Well, I imagine not. There's some,
and so if you don't want that to happen, don't steal.
Right. I guess that's how you sort of reinforce things in society.
And so if we are talking about this libertarian slant to things, then we would say, well, it really is the family. And the family is trying to generate children who can live in a society that does use force. There is force in our society. They have actually they have the doctrine of force, don't they? They have the monopoly on it to some degree.
So do you see a huge correlation when, say somebody grew up in a household where their parents were divorced or there was abuse or whatever else? Does that typically translate to their relationships moving forward? And is there a way to overcome any of those obstacles and issues they face?
Well, the answer to the first part question would be yes. I think that, yes, your environment certainly shapes who you are. And, if that's, but I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't know the answer to that question.
So it's really based on the individual.
It so is based on the individual. And the choices that they make and how they conduct themselves. Yeah. Do people who are children of divorce seem to have a higher incidence of divorce across, like if we look at studies, it seems to be. Sure. There seems to be a correlation. Is it harder to internally regulate yourself when you haven't been exposed to a regulated environment that has the things that you need to grow and develop as a child? Yeah, I think it's reasonable to say that's probably true. Not that you can't change that when you're an adult.
Mm-hmm. What if the trauma is yours but not yours? In other words, what if it's okay? And there's certain constructive things we have to go with here. What if it's past life trauma? What if it's ancestral trauma? Family trauma that's been carried on that's not per se yours, right? You didn't come up with it in this lifetime, but somehow it's been transferred to you to deal with on whatever level, however it got there. Does that function in the same way in terms of how to get rid of it, or how to not really get rid of it, but how to metabolize it?
Have you heard that thing about if you want to know your past life's karma, look at your current situation. If you want to know your future karma, look at your current life.
So either way, you're looking at your current life.
Yeah.
No. If you want to, well, I guess so.
Well,
look at the foot you're on.
Look at the foot you're on. On the surfboard while you're surfing, you're crazy.
So, yeah.
Right.
So, through... So there's a bunch of things you said there. One would be epigenetic trauma. So this is something Rachel Yehuda, who's a researcher, really brilliant researcher in New York at NYU, has, I think, contributed a lot to, which is that individuals who have even grandparents who have experienced a traumatic event. In this case, they looked at Holocaust survivors, people that were in concentration camps. And I believe one of their results was that they had a 300 times, it was a very high number, let's say it was 3 times higher likelihood of presenting to an emergency room for a psychiatric problem. Another study I read was about mice, and I didn't do it. It was an animal study. I just read it. They took mice and they exposed them to some aroma and had electricity on the floor. And so they were obviously creating post-traumatic stress. They were pairing a smell with a trauma, and then giving them the smell and measuring their level of physiological arousal, how anxious they got. Well, that worked, but then their kids, the mice kids who never got shocked and smelled that scent, still had the same physiologic response. And their kids. And it went for almost 7 generations.
That's interesting. So 7 generations is a thing.
Seems to be.
Wow.
Seems to be. And so there is that epigenetic piece that has been, that we can kind of base some studies on, and, whatever the framework that we call science, to say, yes, okay, there is that. Then you brought up something else about past lives. Have you ever heard of Brian Weiss, the psychiatrist, the book Many Lives, Many Masters?
Yes.
That's a pretty cool book.
I've heard the title, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. He experienced, I guess, some a patient, I believe, who was communicating with these between lives beings and was able to tell him things that nobody else would have known. And this was actually before the internet, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sure.
But also personal things. Mm-hmm. I found this book to be really compelling, and there was a therapeutic method that's called LBL. Have you heard of this?
Yes.
LBL therapy, lives between lives. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so after Anna died, I heard about it, and so I wanted to do it because I thought maybe I would get to talk to her. Yeah. No, I didn't. That didn't happen. But I had a really rich experience for 3 hours, going back in time to a Portuguese sailing ship that I was on. That I was murdered, and I was left in the Hawaiian Islands, mm-hmm. And it was actually before. Well, I think that happened before I was going.
Okay.
Before I got the job there. But then the things that I thought were weird about that experience. So I'm not sitting here saying that was real. I was under deep hypnosis. I had this experience in my mind.
Sure.
But what I did notice was a few things. First of all, the ship that I saw, I didn't even know that the Portuguese were in Hawaii. Did you know that?
I did.
Heavily.
Okay.
Heavily.
Interesting.
They have a game they call Portuguese Horseshoes, which is because the Portuguese brought the game there.
Mm-hmm.
So they call them Portuguese. So I said, wow, that's weird. I didn't even know that. And then I looked at like the ships that they were sailing, and it literally was like there were details in it that really shocked me that I saw in this dream state.
Okay.
But again, we could say maybe I saw that somewhere or whatever. I mean, and it was just in my mind's eye.
Well, I think obviously there's a lot of individuals that have done past life regressions and had similar experiences, not saying the ship, but just reliving kind of moments from that life. So
maybe there is enough, evidence there anecdotally to pile on and say, okay, maybe there is something to it.
Sure.
But the most interesting thing, or one of the interesting things that came out of it, was afterwards, I had been dealing with very bad lower back pain at that point in time. The next day, I went home, I went right to sleep. It was exhausting. I went to sleep, slept till the next morning, woke up, went to make coffee, and I'm making coffee, and I'm like, my back doesn't hurt. And it was exactly where I got stabbed before I got thrown off the boat.
Well, and I was going to say, they've always talked about when people are born with beauty marks or scars or whatever else, it's typically they're saying that might have been how you died in your past life. And from that perspective, that back pain, I also have heard a lot where when you're gravitating towards, events in history or whatever else you possibly could have lived in that time period, there's also the notion that, from any perspective on that front, like even when you go to a place or you're living in a place, maybe you kind of gravitate more towards going there because that's familiar to you, because in your past life you were actually there. I had an experience with a past life regression where I was actually reliving the night before D-Day. And I saw, we were basically in a tent seeing kind of, the maps and everything laid out and the battle plans and whatever else. Then just waking up and actually landing on one of the beaches. I honestly am not sure exactly where, but just kind of living through that. And then from there, I felt like I didn't actually die on D-Day, but I think it was shortly thereafter. And, I'm not sure, like literally every year around D-Day, I always have this same reoccurring dream. So was that a past life? I don't know. But I've always had a fascination with World War II. I've also always gravitated towards, Morristown area in New Jersey and that sort of thing, and also Italy. So I think maybe, some of my past lives, if you believe in reincarnation and that sort of thing, perhaps that's what I gravitate most towards. Even as a gladiator in ancient Rome or whatever it was, I did have a past life regression like that as well at one point. So.
And that's an interesting point that he's bringing up, because I think the same modality works when you do psychedelics, where it takes you to that other place, and whatever happens in that other place, it then creates enough separation between you and the trauma to be able to either see it or work on it or we fit it together, whatever. I'm not sure what the modality is to actually metabolize these things, but however that works. Would you tell us a little bit about your psychedelic experience and how that worked for you, or what it was able to do for you? Which one? Any of them. Well, whichever one you think is the most
well, this was when
transformative.
It was that one.
Go ahead.
It was that one when I came back from windsurfing. And, I was still, I don't know, this might have been, maybe a year and a half still, or 2 years after I lost a child. So I was still in a good bit of grief. And what I mean by grief, I mean, like, you'd be having a conversation with me and I'd just start crying pretty much all the time. I trip balls. Can I say that?
Sure.
I sat down at the table where all the mushrooms were laid out for the fudge. There was a party that night. They had a concert. This Gold Don Juan, great guy, singer, really good. He's local Maui. but super cool guy.
Okay.
Was where his house was, and he was doing the party. That's right. Because I had to call him to get picked up. Because it was a little weird. You think psychedelics are all good and they help everyone, but the one that was making the fudge brownies started flipping out and breaking out the house.
Wow.
So yeah. So that was weird. That was a weird part of that experience. But ended up at this concert at it was a Thai restaurant on the beach. They closed it down and they rented it. So it was just and I was on the grass looking up, and I went up out of everything, like where the island, you could see the island and then see the earth and then see how far like everything was and how it was out in this wilderness. And I ended up just getting up and walking out the Hana Highway.
Okay.
Have you ever been to Maui?
No.
There's a famous road there called the Hana Highway. Many people just drive back and drive. But
is that the road to Hana?
Road to
Hana. They call it? Yeah.
And so I just started walking in the middle, like it was nighttime, and there's nobody on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And just ended up at one of the beaches down there, and was just by myself on earth, like on this rock, like just being. And it was just a balancing experience.
Sorry, I just had a thing. It's a little bit of a roller coaster for me talking to you. There's just I'm going through a whole bunch of feelings and things are coming up, but it's very interesting.
Okay.
So
I thought I said something that affected you.
Yeah, no, just because it takes me back to some of the experiences that I've had doing those kinds of things, and it can often be pretty visceral.
Yeah.
So
I was like almost in my animal self, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just being. And that's when I met the mushrooms, when I was laying on the grass and just couldn't stop laughing. Oh. And I hadn't laughed, like in a long time after that. I hadn't laughed, and just, and that was really the beginning of, no, that's not true. It was a part of my healing experience. The beginning was when I had a spiritual awakening. I don't know what else to call it.
Could you talk about that?
I can try, but
Please.
It's kind of complicated.
Okay.
What actually, if you could, when you're explaining it, could you elaborate as to what you feel triggered it?
The death of my daughter.
Okay.
And it would happen. That was that was the beginning of it.
Sure.
I would say up until then, maybe, I don't think I thought of having a personal relationship with a God. Like, okay, yes, I believe, I was brought up with religion. I had religion. I didn't, but, it wasn't like there in my face. And so it was the 4th of July, and that would have been in 2008. And I was at a funeral for a person who committed suicide. And it just happened to be at the same cemetery that she was buried at. So I just canceled work and took the opportunity to go there. This is actually, I learned later that this time of the year is called like the rising of the divine feminine.
Okay.
It has to do, I think, with something a shaman told me this once in Costa Rica. But this time of year, and I don't want to butcher this and mansplain it, so I'm just gonna keep going. But I was at the grave, and I happened to see a butterfly. Okay, and so the butterfly is flying around, and then I leave, and I'm driving down the road, and there's this store that materialized out of thin air. I had gone through this road so many times, and I had never, ever seen this place before. It was not there. It was like I came into a different dimension. Mm-hmm. Okay, there it was. Oh, well, that's a cool store. Let me go in. And it was like, I felt like I was like drawn in to go there. And it was one of those, has a psychic doing card readings and crystals and books, esoterica. And I was not that, like, any way, shape, or form dabbling in the esoteric at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And so I went in, like, perfectly expecting there to be somebody there being like, hey, welcome, come on in. I was expecting you. So I'm walking around the store like, what the hell am I doing in here? Why am I in here? Why am I in here? And I look up and there's this, like, rattle. And the rattle, it's a wooden rattle that's made. You could tell it was like a gourd with a stick. It was red and black. It had red and black beads in it. And on one side, it said, Fred, exclamation point, I shit you not. Sorry. It said, Fred, exclamation point, I shoot you not. Okay. And then I turned it on the other side and it said, Angel. What had happened about a week prior was a dream where I realized that my kid's name, Anna Joelle, was if you contracted it and took out the letters, it was Angel. I saw it in a dream. Whoa. I bought this thing. I took it home. It was a treasure. And the guy who sold its name was there, Mickey Lee, and his phone number. I called him up. Where did this come from? Central America. It's from the Cuna Indians in Panama. And it is the ceremony where the father makes it for the daughter for his fate, for the phase of life's transition ceremony.
Wow. What's the phase of life? What does that mean?
In there, I guess, there are girls, when they turn 13, they have some ritual like ceremony. Become to an adult.
Yeah.
Right. But it had my name and...
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm like, wow, this is... and I had been spending a lot of time at the grave. And so I went back to the grave the next day. And there's the butterfly again. And the butterfly lands on my hand. And I start giving the butterfly water. And it's drinking water from my hand. Flying around, and I'm talking to it. And it lands on my ear. I have pictures of it. I took my phone out. This is right even when, iPhone 1.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I have a picture of me smiling with that thing on my ear. I walked out of the cemetery with the thing on my ear. It disappeared. And that was the beginning of the sort of journey of going, and then the LBL, but that was the impetus of my thinking, hey, maybe there's something else going on besides this scientific life that I have been trying to live up to now.
That's fascinating. You did ayahuasca.
I have not that I think of. No, DMT. I don't think I've done ayahuasca. DMT. I don't think I have had an ayahuasca ceremony. It's my recollection. It's right now. No. Yes, I have. Sorry.
Well, he got there, folks. Yeah.
No, I did.
It was a long, winding road.
I did.
He's like, absolutely not. Yes. What are you, Rick James?
No.
No, of course not. Okay. Would you be okay with talking about that? In terms of how, and you need to talk about everything. But
I don't think I did it right.
Well,
I don't think I did. I didn't do any cleansing. I didn't do that ceremony that people do beforehand.
Listen, I didn't do mine right, and it still changed my life.
Yeah.
So, it's, I don't know if doing it right, just because that's how some people do it, that might be the optimal way of doing it. But I think just doing it can oftentimes still have a great effect.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be driving when you're doing it.
Oh no! What? How is that even possible? What? How do you?
So my friend, one of my friends,
operate motor vehicles.
Here's what happened. One of my friends said he was a shaman, and he said, "Hey, that tea you asked for, I got you some." And I was like, "I don't remember asking for tea. What's he talking about?" I put it in your fridge. I said, "Okay, thanks." So we had to drive somewhere,
right?
And I had the tea. Oh, this is good. And then about, 20, 30 minutes into the ride, it clicked. Oh, that was ayahuasca. So I said, honey, I think you have to drive. That was when I took ayahuasca.
But without doing the MAOI inhibitor.
I think it was. I don't.
It would have been very mild.
I don't think it was. Was not a. No, it was not a very.
No, it could
intense
have been,
experience.
But you know as well as I do, if you don't lower the blood-brain barrier, it's just going to be metabolized in your stomach. So irrespective of how strong the concoction was, if you don't have the MAOI coupled with it.
But do you think it could have already been mixed?
It's not typically mixed. In fact, you're supposed to take them about a half hour apart to allow the MAOI to do its job to lower the blood-brain barrier, and then you have your experience.
Okay.
And what ends up kicking you out of the experience is when the MAOI inhibitor wards off. Because once that happens, it just kicks you out of that world.
Okay.
And that's how you come back.
I think it's the...
that's why if you're on MAOI inhibitors, you could kill yourself with it because you can have serotonin toxicity. Because you have no ability to then raise the barrier back up.
I don't think it's the blood-brain barrier. I think it's the enzyme that's being inhibited in the gut.
Okay.
So there's two MAOI. There's two monoamine oxidase. One is in the gut and one is in the brain.
Got it.
And I think you have to take the one that inhibits the one in the gut so it gets to the brain.
So it gets to the brain.
It's the same with Parkinson drugs like L-Dopa. It's the same thing. You have to do the same thing with it because I think. I'm not an expert in it.
Have you used things like Mucuna or Kana?
I've seen the Mark of the Frog.
No, that's Bufo.
Okay, Kano. I think it's called Kano.
Oh, so that's a little different. No, I'm talking about these are like roots and things that are just they're like mild euphorians and things like that. Okay, so but you bring up a good point. So have you tried Bufo? Did you do the thing where I
didn't.
No. Okay.
I didn't want to throw up like that.
Yeah.
And there can be, I mean, one of the complications of that is, death.
Well, death is a complication, certainly.
And I just didn't, I've never seen that as being, I don't know, something that's I felt needed.
I want to talk a little bit about, and then we're going to get into your technology because I think it's fascinating and so we go, but can we talk about men's issues for a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to.
Yeah,
I was hoping we would.
And could we talk about that a little bit? Like, how do you see trauma occurring in men as regards women? Is therapy different for men as regards and women?
Can I also just elaborate on that? I also wanted to ask because obviously I would say for men especially, there's almost like a stigmatism.
Stigma.
Stigma. Sorry. There is a stigma that, they might not necessarily go and seek help. They feel like that's not masculine or whatever else. There's also...
Well, it's not.
But I think nowadays there's also this stigma as well where, if you're a firearms owner in certain states, you might get flagged or whatever else. It's like, how can you circumvent that first and foremost? And then to Alex's point, from that perspective, what are the common health issues or mental health issues that individuals face, men versus women, and how did that get treated?
Good question.
It's about 47 questions, but
no. I think it started and ended with the same question, which was about men and women's differences. In looking at brain scans and trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, there are differences in the brains. Their brains change differently. So, like men tend to, I think they get more impulsive with trauma and PTSD and tend to have more of the re-experiencing. And I think there's more of a fear reaction, amygdala. The amygdala gets higher volume in women. But there was definitely a study a few years ago showing the differences. And I hope I got that right. But so yes, it would go to then further down. I mean, just thinking about this outright. So if you're going to have differences in the brain, then the brain is going to be, our brains are really just master glands in our bodies. I see that it is as a kind of a chemical clock, but it has to deal with the timing of all the hormones and everything that's regulated. And so we have different hormonal ratios, men and women. I mean, if I'm not being political by saying that. At least what I learned in school. So the way that one would want to address it probably might be different too. I mean, for me, it was a lot of risking my life on things or feeling like I was. Adrenaline, resetting that system. With, in that particular case, surfing, but physical activity. I mean, maybe that has a higher component for individuals who are showing a certain form of behavior in relation to trauma or life events. And the other question was about stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think what is that stigma? What is it? What is it? Like, what are the thoughts behind it? What are the thoughts behind the stigma?
I mean, from my personal perspective, and obviously it's just my opinion, I think that a lot of men are probably too stubborn or proud to say they need help. I think there's also a societal stigma that it's like, hey, if I'm going to see a psychiatrist or some kind of medical professional for, say it's for addiction or overcoming trauma, I think they look at that as, I think men in general, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like we're fixers, right? We try to fix everything. We're logical beings. So from that perspective, I think most individuals would say, oh, there should be a way I could fix this on my own.
The other piece of it is, and as we always know, it's skating that edge, right? Because if you fall on either side, it gets a little. So society now has also thrown in, if you don't get this and you just want to be a man on your own, that's toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
So, you have the other part of the equation, which is just, it's almost forcing you to do certain things or telling you that, acting out in a way that is traditionally male could now be seen as toxic or whatever the case. I'm not saying there isn't such a thing as toxic masculinity in certain cases, possibly, or maybe that there's something out there that could be.
So a gender is toxic.
No, not on the whole, certainly, but certain behavior.
So there has to be toxic femininity too.
I'm sure there is. So
then it would have to be just toxic.
Everything's toxic.
No, it would just be toxic behavior.
Toxic behavior. Yeah, absolutely. Without the gender component.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which would be behavior that is not conducive to either society, Babylon, as we call it. Babylon. Or something that, could lead to violence or other things that are not necessarily what you want.
I abhor violence.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's an answer. And so if that's what we're reflecting as toxic masculinity, I mean, that's violent behavior.
I just bring it up because it's being talked about currently, right? So, it's something that...
And I do think there's a stigma that when you talk about traditional gender roles, as an example, I think that's really where there's a movement, obviously, and I'm not being condescending or anything else. Whatever everybody's opinion is, you can formulate that on your own. But, I think it's just when you look at those traditional gender roles, I think a lot of people nowadays call that toxic masculinity.
I see. You know how when the housing market goes way, it just goes crazy and then they do a correction.
Yeah.
I think we're headed for a correction. I think that society is going to end up having a correction here because it's not working.
Yeah.
Part of the, I think, success of English as a language is our ability to speak and express ourselves and conduct ourselves in a way that conveys direction and emotion and is specific. And so then having an editorial conversation that's the side conversation to the actual narrative is destructive. And I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's efficient. And I think we tend to be lazy. And so I don't think we're going to have to keep having all of it's going to go back with I think generationally, because if this worked, then wouldn't it already be working?
Well, yeah. I mean, you get into sort of the idea of it being a modern Victorian age where no one's saying what they're actually saying. They're just talking around all of the points because there's an inherent idea.
Yeah, that's not going to work. Oh. Well, then so either this gets conquered or it corrects. I mean, it doesn't work. If it worked, we would have it.
Yeah, that's yeah, absolutely.
We've had a lot of time to, do about whatever we want. I mean, people want to think, oh, we're in such a free time and no, not really. There's a lot of human history.
Oh yeah.
There's stigma. I want to destigmatize it. If you have a concussion and you hit your head and you don't know it, you don't think you do. You say, I don't, but I have depression. Oh, but I have anxiety. Oh, I keep going to these therapists. I can't figure out the problem because every time this happens, I lose my temper. Well, that's a problem with your body. Like, that's clear for I think, men to understand that. Like, we can take a machine, read the electrical signature, compare that to a group and say the brain is not operating efficiently in this area and we can do XYZ to help it operate more efficiently, measure that again in the future and determine how you're feeling and actually performing. So in my studies, I see that people's memory gets better, that their reaction time gets better. And I recorded a lot of people doing testing pre and post. So we see like things with processing speed go up, memory improves. So I think for like guys, it's like, well, wouldn't you want to get and improve? Like, you go to the gym and you want to lift more weights. Wouldn't you want to improve your reaction time and your attention and concentration? So the neurofeedback that we do, there's no talking. I don't ask people about their history. I look at the brain, try to get the diagnosis, make a computer protocol, and they watch a video.
Okay, before we get into this, let's just go back and talk about the entirety of the process. So you have a process, what is it called?
It's called QEEG neurofeedback.
Okay. And your company is Minerva?
Minerva.
Minerva. Mm-hmm. And that is the logo for it. Minerva. Okay. And that is Minerva is there you go. So Minerva was the original goddess of knowledge, correct?
Yes.
Athena,
okay.
As it was then put into the Roman religion was Minerva. Mm-hmm. So Minerva seems to be a proprietary understanding of this regards my knowledge,
correct.
So to speak.
You got it.
I love that.
You got it.
I think that's cool.
You actually got it.
So let's talk about Minerva. What is it all about?
So that was the idea. Minerva was the goddess of patron goddess of art, medicine, and warfare. Actually, became warfare, but medicine and art originally. And so I just thought that as far as, and also there was a hat, she had a helmet involved as well. Gallia, I think, was the helmet. So there's the brain scan piece. So we have a brain scanner. That is just, all that is an EEG. It's not, the equipment is so irrelevant. There are so many different ways to get brain waves. So if anybody cares and wants to know what equipment someone uses, it's like go ask a chef at some restaurant what kind of knives they use and see what they say. It's the same thing. What kind of ovens do you have? Mm-hmm. It cooks the food.
Right.
So we acquire the EEG and then, so your brain makes electrical activity. Do you know that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the neurons have because of the charge that they have, because of their regulating different ions, they can have a higher charge in one area and a lower charge in another area. And that depends on if their nerves are firing or not. The electrical impulses are what lead to the chemical impulses. So when you hear about the soup, the serotonin, you've heard serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. Monoamine oxidase is the enzyme that activates those neurotransmitters. It sits between the synapse, and so one nerve cell puts out a little packet of, say, serotonin, and the MAO activates the serotonin, then the other cell can react to it, send an electrical impulse down its whole, line, and then tell the next cell, hey, here's some information. So we're recording this electrical activity that's happening in the brain through the scalp. And then by taking a sample of that, if we know a group of people, if I have a group of people that have had a concussion, and then we've marked them, they've taken tests for their performance and know how bad their performance is, how good their performance is, we can take the brain waves and then compare them to that group and say, okay, your brain waves seem to match this group of people that have had concussion. What I ended up doing with our machine and our software program called ANA, Advanced Neural Network Analysis, or the ghost in the machine, is...
That's beautiful. You named it.
I did.
For your daughter.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
So, because we always have to say it.
Sure.
Now. Yeah. Gave her life.
That's beautiful.
So, when Anna looks at the EEG, she actually will compare it to like 20,000, 25,000 different scans in a matter of a few seconds, minutes, and then give like percentages of groups of people who most match that. So could say, okay, so 36% chance of post-traumatic stress disorder, 40% chance of OCD, whatever, and take those patterns and say, okay, well, based on these people, they did the following things and got better.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I say following things, I mean neurofeedback, I mean specific supplementation. In some cases, there's certain genetic abnormalities that have a huge psych component. Gene testing is so important in mental ill health, really.
Okay.
MTHFR, MTR, and COMT are three biggies that people have deficiencies in, and that then has an association with a large amount of mental health issues. So when we figure out what the protocol is going to be, it's called a protocol. But really what that is a series of, it's an obstacle course your brain has to jump through electrically to make a movie on a screenplay.
Yes.
So you're watching the screen and it gets bright and loud when your brain is doing what the computer is asking it to do. And it gets dark and soft when it's not. And it's doing this for every 400 milliseconds. It's pinging the brain and asking it a digital question saying, hey, can you make your brainwaves in this electrical asana? I call it electrical posture. Mm-hmm. Can you put your brain in this electrical posture? And if the brain can, and it does really good, and the movie can play, say, 70% of the time, we just make it harder. So we say, okay, now you can do it with this much voltage here. Now do it with this much voltage here. And so we start to decrease, or increase the areas that are the brain is allowed to make the movie play with. And so over time it learns, hey, not only can I make a movie play, but when I do this, it's more efficient. I use less ATP, I use less energy. And then the individual, the person, goes out and say they have trouble with social environments and can't go to the bank to see the bank teller, and they have to put in a deposit. So they have to do something at the bank. This is a real life example. Mm-hmm. So after doing this and lowering the anxiety, the way the brain is responding to the environment, they then are able to go into the bank and do that, which then reinforces what they're doing in the training. So being able to do more things then is a self-reinforcing phenomenon.
Interesting. So you do the genetic testing. That's part of your
We do
deal.
part of the,
okay.
yeah.
And you do the brain scanning.
So a real psych eval should include all of the, basic labs that we do, right? So basic labs, in addition to doing genetic testing, heavy metal testing, allergy testing,
mm-hmm.
brain scan, performance testing. So how quick can you press the button? How good is your attention? How good is your memory? Mm-hmm. Because people are really unreliable about this. And you see some people, it's like, really? And you captain a cruise ship?
Wow, interesting.
Which brings up some reasons why I think it's not as accepted as it could be in the world. What we do, why isn't this used part and parcel for all mental health examinations like we use a stethoscope? I mean, it should be. So those things, the brain scan, the artificial intelligence, compiling everything together and giving a full understanding of what is the pathway to health.
Okay. So now you have, after all these diagnostic things, you now have some results that have come up. What do you do to actually, and we don't want to use the word cure, obviously, but to try to get rid of the symptoms of whatever's happening?
Meet the person where they're at.
And what does that mean?
It means that sometimes you go to the doctor and you don't want to hear that you should quit smoking and stop drinking.
Right. So you discuss it with them, like, here's where we are, right? But then what's the modality for treatment?
So the first thing that I think that needs to be done for what, though? Like a traumatic brain injury? Like
for whatever you come up with, right? So whatever the thing is. So yeah, let's say it's a traumatic brain injury.
Okay. Or even like we could say Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's or dementia in general.
Dementia in general, that's a better one.
Yeah.
So dementia in general, it's important to know what type of dementia it is. There's like 5 or 6 kinds. One is called dementia pugilistica, which is from being hit in the head. So as individuals age, as we age, our brain becomes less efficient. We lose resources. Our ventricles get bigger. We lose, volume. And so if there is a traumatic brain injury, then it becomes more apparent. It becomes more noticeable because the person has lost resources, as well as there's calcification in areas that aren't used. So the differentiation of what kind of dementia it is.
Like the pineal gland?
Perhaps.
So
the that's a whole nother can of worms. Right, because then you have to talk about substances. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is why I said in the beginning it's going to be very difficult to actually cure or treat mental illness, because can we talk about fluoride?
I mean, we could talk about fluoride.
No, we cannot.
Well, wow. without
it's
trying
good for
to
your
speculate
teeth.
On why it's introduced into the waters and so on. But
well, ask a dentist, what is the LD50 of fluoride?
I don't know what that is.
LD50 is the lethal dose that it kills 50% of the population. Because everything has an LD50. Every drug has an LD50.
Sure.
The higher the LD50, the more safe the drug. Lithium, for example, has the lowest. It's one of the most toxic medications that can be used in medicine. On the other hand, melatonin is huge. That thing, 300 milligrams, I think, is the LD50 on melatonin.
Oh, interesting.
So you'd have to take 300 and you still might not die. You have a 50-50 chance. Don't take 300 milligrams of melatonin.
You heard it here, folks. Yes. No more than
you follow the directions.
$2.99.
Or heal your pineal and you won't need it.
Yes.
So, but these are things where, is it really bad? Is it needed? Does it help your teeth? The science disagrees with your opinion if you say no, right? There's Harvard has a school of dental public health. It's look at who funds it.
Well, yeah, sure. Absolutely. Understood.
So some of these things are difficult to address and treat, right? Some of them, maybe some of the things that you want to maybe even look for, you don't.
But even as society has grown, we do things like, if you watch old Jacques Cousteau episodes, right? So Jacques Cousteau being a scientist, he was on the old Calypso, and they used to chain smoke in the submarine. Yeah. Well, people don't do that anymore because it was not a good idea, but it was socially acceptable at the time. I'd say people used to bring
doctors used to smoke. Well, I've had doctor teachers in medical. I mean, I'm old enough to have doctors who smoked in their class while they're teaching.
Absolutely. Or they used to bring mercury home for the kids to play with. Because it was an odd thing. So people don't do that anymore. Right. So at some point we might get to the point where we decide fluoride is not the thing to be doing. we can open ourselves up to that discussion and say that's, in the normal course of whatever society is, it might not be acceptable to put fluoride in water or in toothpaste anymore. We're not there yet for whatever reason.
Well, it's certainly safe in certain amounts, and that's why I'm asking what's the LD50.
Sure.
We don't know. And then how much are you getting versus me versus you?
Right.
Because there's also no argument that it is toxic. I mean, it's a poison. There's no argument that that's true as well.
Anybody would realize.
Nobody disagrees with that.
Right.
So you brought up the pineal gland, and I know that there's a lot of people that bring the calcification of the pineal gland, sleep problems with having an active third eye chakra, right? Mm-hmm. That's associated with fluoride. I know that that's part of a theory.
They do say that.
But I have no basis to believe it or discount it.
Fluoride-less toothpaste. I don't, just for my own personal choice, I choose not to have fluoride in my toothpaste.
Me too.
Right. And, at least in New Jersey, as far as I understand, they don't put it in the water.
They don't?
So, no.
Oh.
They put other stuff, chlorine and other things like that. But no, in New Jersey, my understanding is, at least I could be wrong, but my understanding is they do not put it in the water.
I heard that it was Morris County didn't.
Well, it could be based on the county law. I thought it was statewide, but
I've also heard that it's not necessarily added to water, but because obviously there's so much that gets flushed and recycled, they're saying there's tons of, birth control and estrogen that goes into the water and such that influences people as well today. Well, obviously.
There's all kinds of things that could happen.
Well, so there is, it's what, it's $10 to have a water test kit that is going to test everything. 30 different components in your water within the day if you want to order that on Amazon. So that's what I mean, meeting people where they're at. How health conscious are they? Are they at a place where they've already realized that there are certain compounds that are causing them disease and so they've eliminated those? Or are they at the beginning of that pathway where it's like, okay, this is your brain.
But where do you go with that? I mean, are we all going to live in Faraday cages and only eat food that we ourselves grow?
Wheat.
And it's kind of like, it's how we have to live in the world, right? On whatever this world is, whatever this matrix is. So where's the happy medium point where we can still exist in normal society, quote unquote, and have an experience of what this is and not have to live in the jungles of Costa Rica per se?
I don't know.
Right.
I did it in Costa Rica. It worked there. It doesn't here.
Right. But maybe there's other stuff that can work here, or to some extent, or to enough of an extent where we can still have healthy lives and other things like that. I don't know. In Babylon, as we call it.
Well, I think we've touched on, television, electronic devices. I mean, these are things that are strongly influencing people.
So maybe keep those to more of a minimum. Is if possible.
Yeah.
And,
but then is that a disease?
Well,
is cell phone addiction a disease now?
It could be. I mean, it has been talked about saying that young kids, especially if they're on iPads all day or other things like that, you take it away from them, they exhibit withdrawal-like symptoms.
Yeah.
So that could be, it gets back to whether addiction is a disease or not.
That's what I was asking.
But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. But I can certainly say that, for certain addictions that I've exhibited over my lifetime, if I don't get that thing, I will have a physical withdrawal. Are
you going to smoke your cigars today, or is it because we're talking about addiction?
No, we can't smoke in here, unfortunately.
Oh.
But in the other podcast studio we were in, we were able to some extent. Unfortunately, we cannot smoke these here. We can obviously smoke them later.
Because I was hoping it wasn't just on account of me thinking that I don't.
No.
Because it doesn't bother me.
No, understood. Can we talk about how to specifically tonify or give tonics to our pineal glands to help us out with certain things? What would be good to help us?
I don't think I'm an expert on that. I think, if you are subscribing to the idea that fluoride is somehow causing calcification, then one might want to
minimize that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't use fluoride toothpaste. I don't have it in the water. I argue with my dentist when he's And he thinks I'm one of those crazy people, that wears tinfoil hats.
You have mentioned, yes, the tinfoil hats. You have mentioned the idea of stem cell therapy.
I do, yeah. I was going to bring that up.
Please.
So in dementia, that's something where it's really been incredible to see how that works. And being an observer in that. I don't administer them. I work with doctors who use them. And so there are specific kinds and types that you have to administer for different types of problems. And also the blood-brain barrier is something that has to be actually made more permeable for neurologic issues with stem cells. And I think this research and many of these individual doctors have been, I think, working with this for many years now, 20 plus years. But now some of the universities are putting out studies showing that, yes, it seems as though certain kinds of stem cell infusions is working for these neurological problems like Parkinson's and like Alzheimer's. So it's really getting this, the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. How do you figure out, how do you know if you have Alzheimer's or not? Well, I would say, there's a blood test. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah. Quest.
Diagnostics. They have their own.
So test. It goes on your insurance. Yeah. It tests the amyloid plaque in your bloodstream. The ratio of amyloid, good amyloid to bad amyloid, and if you have a high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And so why wouldn't an individual who has a family member who have Alzheimer's want to know, so then they could do things to potentially lower the amyloid in their blood? And there's actually a new medication, but there's obviously going to be natural ways to do that. But that has been shown to lower the amyloid protein in the blood.
And again, not to get too crazy societal, but that's also why I choose not to have aluminum-based deodorants. Because they have shown somewhat of a correlation to a potential increase in exposure to Alzheimer or other dementias over time.
I have to take a couple others that I've seen as being high risk. First of all, alcohol. Alcohol is one of the highest risks.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Any particular?
Not red wine. Obviously the red wine thing is supposed to be protective. There's supposed to be neuro and cardioprotective effects of that. But no, it seems as though chronic drinking seems to have a high correlation with going on to develop Alzheimer's. Herpes, cold sores, herpes simplex 1.
Yes.
That lives in the trigeminal nerve and up into the brain. Mm-hmm. And so that's another one that's considered to be a high risk factor. And also hearing loss.
Hearing loss.
Yeah. So losing your hearing is also, having poor hearing is also believed to be somewhat associated with it. So there's some other things I've seen and I ask about. But yeah, I mean, that goes into that group of disorders that we're not gonna try to address as being part of the mental illness constellation. Mm-hmm. Well, I am, but as a large group of providers or practitioners, let's take the hypothetical that fluoride does cause calcification of the pineal.
Sure,
we're not saying that's true, but let's
just as hypothetical. Right.
Okay, so let's now broadcast that. Let's get T-shirts and everything. Who's going to disagree with us?
Whoever makes fluoride, I guess.
And all the products that has it in it.
Sure.
Right. And do you think there's a lot of those?
Probably.
Right.
So, look, yeah, I get it. My understanding is psilocybin is a strong helper to dementia by creating neuroplasticity in the brain and other things of that nature.
I would love that.
Do you know about that? Has that been shown?
I don't. I have never come across that, but I'll Google it when I get out of here.
Yeah, there's anecdotal evidence that there. Paul Stamets talks about it quite a bit. And not just that, but a lot of different mushrooms, right? Not just the magic mushrooms, so to speak, but a lot of mushrooms, cordyceps, lion's mane, all of those that add and increase neuroplasticity in the brain.
The only cases I've seen of individuals that improve their memory and have brain scans look better who have Alzheimer's dementia are those that do stem cells, neuropeptides, but this is going on with, the basic healthy lifestyle that you need to even before you start wasting your money on that, right? Like you're going to waste your money on that if you're going to go out and smoke and drink and everything and think that you're going to take these stem cells and it's magically going to heal you. So you have to get the milieu, the body correct, pH, have vitamins, electrolytes before that's done. So if you get the right ones and they can take up residence, then that along with neurofeedback has we've seen improve people's memory on testing. I'm going to be publishing that literature.
So you've said you don't eat pork.
I don't.
So what's interesting is I have a friend of mine who's studying to be a shaman, curandero, as they call it, and he's learning all the music and all of the stuff in the Amazon with it. He's down in Peru right now. He doesn't eat pork either, and the interesting part is he's done dietas with various plants down there.
I bet he doesn't eat dolphin either.
Probably not.
It's the one.
I don't know how much dolphin there is around there, but or in general.
Are you referring to mahi-mahi?
No, the mammal.
Actual dolphin.
Yeah, the mammal.
Actual dolphin. Okay.
We actually don't, as a species, eat many carnivorous animals. Carnivorous mammals.
Oh, carnivorous mammals.
We don't really tend to eat carnivorous mammals.
That's true enough.
Yeah,
I guess.
I mean, if you can think of one, I'd be happy.
Bear. To some extent, people eat bear.
To some extent,
yeah.
I mean, I think they're going to get the deer and the caribou first before they go after the bear.
Oh no, but the idea is that people have bear steaks and things. But my understanding is it's not very good.
Right, it's not very good. It's oily and red. Right. It's right.
But like wild boar and regular pig.
That's it. And there you go.
Yeah,
there's one. There's the only one.
Right. But what he said was when you eat pork, whatever plant medicine you have ingested that is taking up residence, which is what I thought about when you said that, gets kicked out of your body.
Yeah.
Through the eating of the pork. Now, again, that's a metaphysical thing. That's their belief in the
I don't think so. I think it's completely scientific.
Talk more about that.
Well, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency and vibration. So said Tesla. That energy that pork has, it's like, think about them, like put yourself in like matrix vision for a minute and like take the thing and imagine it has like this, like, blue
pill, red pill,
and then it turns your whole body blue. Well, that's what happens when you take meds or drugs or anything like that. It's imparting a frequency upon you.
Sure.
Right. That also has to so if you're tuning in your own channel, nothing is able to impart a frequency upon you. And so pork is something that I know many cultures have.
Yes.
So many cultures have. I ate pork my whole life. I just had a dream along this whole. I didn't bring this up. It came up in my mind when I was telling you about the butterfly and the rattle. So in this same time period, in the same days, Anna visited me in a dream, literally realistic, like I was there, life-like dream, and just said, "Don't eat pork." And I had done my original brain research with pigs, with swine. They're most closely related to humans. That's why we give swine heart valves, porcine heart valves.
Yes.
That's why we grow tissue on pigs. Like if we have to put an ear on someone, we'll grow it on a pig. And I saw this orc, orc Lord of the Rings transformation of pigs into humans. And she was like, no, they're animal, they're people, they're on earth living out their karma. That's why they're in the mud. They don't sweat. They're dirty. Never, never, never eat pork again. And so I woke up from that dream. And since that since that dream, I have never knowingly or willfully eaten pork.
That is something. That is something.
I mean, I still like the taste of it. Like I look at it on pizza, and I would love to. I still
pepperoni,
I joke and I say, "Can she come back to me in a dream and say eat some pork? Because I'll go to town on some ribs. I swear."
And who doesn't love bacon?
I mean, pork chops are good, right? That scene from Pulp Fiction.
Exactly.
So it was a command. It was a covenant between me and my dead daughter that she gave me that seemed so realistic and lifelike that I followed it, and I felt like it's guided me as a principle in my life.
And it's been a net positive for you.
I miss Like I said, I miss ribs.
Yeah, I get it.
I've gotten really good at making beef short ribs.
Sure, those are delicious.
I mean, you can make
Absolutely.
them. You can, but I don't have any reason to say it's been a net positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know the choices had I
done otherwise.
I believe that if I were eating pork for whatever reason, I would not be here.
Understood. Interesting.
Right? Like maybe I would be like, oh, there's the ribs across the street, and I'd be walking across the street and a bus would run me over or something. I don't know, but I've always held this belief that it's keeping me from something.
Fair.
Understood.
Okay. Any other questions you want to?
I was going to ask, so if you could just give a quick synopsis, I'm sure, is a lot of this covered under insurance? I mean, I know some of this is preventative maintenance. If somebody was to require your services or want to do these brain scans and other types of things, is that something that typically the insurance companies will cover? And from that perspective as well, can you just kind of give us a little synopsis of the steps you're alluding to going to Quest and getting, your vitals and meds, or not your meds, but your blood work done, just to kind of look at your vitamin levels or whatever else? Would you just kind of give us a little synopsis of like the steps you would take and what would be best for each person to do?
Sure. Insurance. So, yes, it's state by state. I think it's 8 or 9 states right now, like fully will accept this QEEG and neurofeedback as being viable treatments for various different psychiatric or neurologic problems. New Jersey is pretty good with that. Personally, me and our company doesn't directly bill the insurance companies like that. But, our patients often go to the insurance company and get reimbursement.
Sure.
But then if we're doing this through certain doctors, then those doctors might have them on their panel or something. And then, so yes, it is something that is accessible to individuals through their insurance in many cases, especially the clinical exam. The clinical exam consists of, I think, testing, well, it's huge. Like you got to check balance, like ultrasound for circulation and, making sure blood flow to the brain is intact and good, and as well as basic things, heart, then lab testing, which would consist of like comprehensive metabolic testing, which is, just your sodium, potassium, glucose, that kind of stuff. Pre-diabetes, diabetes, hemoglobin A1C, those tests, because that can affect the brain and the nervous system. Vitamin D, really important. Vitamin B12, really important. Looking at people have Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue is associated with this. Lupus, autoinflammatory problems. It's really from a good history, or else you'll end up just shotgun guessing. But after a good history, you can narrow this down and determine, is there a family history of Alzheimer's? Is there a family history of stroke or Parkinson's? And that helps to narrow it down. And then having the brain scan, the testing. When I say testing, it's you go online and you answer like a 30-minute, 40-minute. It takes you through a series of games or exercises in which it's testing your brain. So having that baseline to determine if a person got better or not. So you have actual performance testing. And then reviewing that with the individual, and then coming up with some kind of a plan of action that has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Okay.
Which is really, I think, different. Like, so it's like, I think, and maybe circling back to men's health a little bit, but the stigma that we're talking about is that there's this problem that's out there that I can't deal with. And therefore, I have to go to someone to tell them about it, and they're going to tell me what to do. Like, that's it. That's not a guy. That's not what most men think. Like, I think. I don't know.
No.
Being one, in my experience, I don't want to speak for all, but,
right.
It's just not what you're supposed to do.
As men.
As men.
Traditionally speaking.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Well,
Well, yeah, exactly. That's right. You're supposed to solve your own problems, figure it out, and move forward.
Self-sufficient, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the idea. This is the concept more that, whether it be from hitting your head, having things happen to you in the environment, being poisoned or whatever, that then you can actually figure out the problem and then have some control over it to be able to deal with it. It's like, no, you're not going to be in therapy for the next 20 years. So maybe that, there's a less of relinquishing of control.
That's interesting. Or
it's the opposite. It's self-efficacy, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So another way to say it would be you're taking back agency in the process, right? You're taking back your ability to affect the world, and your place in it, and how you choose to walk.
And isn't that one of the very essence of the masculine concept?
Absolutely.
It's forging your own path,
right?
Having your own hero's journey. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what does it mean to be a man in the modern day?
Ask me, what is a man?
Yes. What is a man? What is a man?
It's a person. No.
Shouldn't be that hard a question, right?
Well, is it? I mean, obviously there's a biological answer that's easy. Sure. It's a human with XY chromosomes, right? That exhibits the physiologic characteristics of a man.
Right.
I mean, that is the obvious and easy answer. But I thought you were asking me a more existential question as to what is man's role in society and the world. And I think that, I think Russian authors freezing their butts off for, years on end wrote stories about that much better than I.
Well, like the Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, maybe, or something like that. No, absolutely. And honestly, thank you so much for coming on today, Freddie. Your story is fascinating. I think the things that you provide are absolutely incredible. We would like to, maybe we can maybe we come to you and we can just tape on our iPhones how one of these processes takes or something like that, if that's okay with you. And we can include that if that's possible.
I haven't had a physical office setting here yet.
Okay.
I'll have one in August. Love to have you over.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll go to a lodge and try to do it there or something if we can, if that's easier. But we'll figure that out. So again, thank you for being on.
Thanks for inviting me and
thank you so
making
much
it so
for
much
coming
fun
today.
Absolutely. It's so we are brothers of the Arcana, and until next time, I am Alex Aldea.
I am Dave Ferrigno.
I am Freddie Starr.
Dr. Freddie Starr.
Dr. Freddie Starr. Thank you so much. See you soon, guys. Take care.
Ciao. And God bless.